The Championship bottom three is getting increasingly interesting, especially after the latest round of fixtures, with Cardiff winning back-to-back matches, Rotherham continuing to struggle, new managers in at Huddersfield, Blackpool and Wigan, who have all had a little bit of a bounce recently. So for today's video, we're going to be putting those 5 Championship clubs who are down at the bottom of the Championship up against each other. We're going to be comparing their underlying stats so far this season to work out, as of right now, who are the most likely sides to be relegated this season. If you do go on to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like, and if you'd like to see a version of this for the top 6 race, do leave a like on today's video. But without any further ado, let's jump into this one. So the first point of comparison to draw each of these sides to is points per game. It's the most obvious metric that we've got to work on at the moment, as a few sides have got games in hand and things like that. But as we can see right here, this paints the picture of how ridiculously tight it's set up to be at the end of the season because of how close these averages are at the moment. As things stand, Wigan, Blackpool and Huddersfield all averaging 0.97 points per game, just below that 1 point per game margin. And then we've got Rotherham and Cardiff, who are marginally above it as things stand. Rotherham with 1.03 and Cardiff on 1.06. Those back-to-back wins for Cardiff massively boosting them in this regard. And in terms of what that means for the end of the season, these are the current projected points of each of those Championship sides. Wigan, Blackpool and Huddersfield all projected to finish on 45 points this season, slightly less than that 1 point per game margin. Rotherham just above the dotted line on 47 points, and then Cardiff on 49 points. But the margins there are ridiculously tight between all 5 sides in fact. And what it also tells us is that this Championship season is set up to be a pretty high margin in terms of the points tallies each club's going to need to pick up to avoid relegation. Thinking back to last season, for example, 38 points would have guaranteed you Championship survival, whereas this season it's looking like a bare minimum of 46 points to get you over the line, and even that may still see you relegated. The last time that the points tallies were this high at the bottom of the Championship, you had to go back to 2019/20 when Charlton were relegated with 48 points to their name. It's looking like one of those seasons once again, and I think to properly guarantee your safety, you're looking at 50 points this season, if I'm honest. Having a look into some of the underlying metrics do also paint the picture, and they tell us where each side has been struggling so far this season. First of all, looking into goals per game, this has been a massive flaw in Cardiff's squad so far this season, massively below everyone else with this regard. 0.76 goals per game. Not just the low scorers in this regard, but outright the lowest scorers in the Championship right now. It's been a real struggle for them so far this season. Between the rest of the sides, there's not as much of a margin in there. We've got Wigan next up, 0.91 goals per game, obviously since Maloney's come in. Really good defensively, not great going forward. Then got Huddersfield, Blackpool and Rotherham, who have been the most prolific, averaging 1.06 goals per game, but compared to the rest of the Championship, these are some really small numbers. And then this one is a little bit of a flip of the script. Goals against per game, Cardiff by far and away having the best defensive record in this regard, and actually having one of the more solid defences throughout the whole of the Championship, not just comparing it to the sides down at the bottom. Only just conceding over a goal per game, 1.09, is really decent going. It's just the fact that they can't hit the back of the net why they're in this situation at the moment. The worst team in this regard has been Wigan so far this season, who have conceded an average of 1.56 goals per game, and that's quite interesting to look at actually, because since Maloney's been in there, that's probably been their strongest suit actually, keeping things tight at the back. And we can see by the amount of goals they've conceded so far this season why that was his first port of call to go ahead, strengthen them at the back, make them tough to beat. There's been a lot of sort of niggly draws in there for Wigan recently. Now from his perspective, it's all about going ahead and getting some of those draws turned into wins with some goals over the line. But once again, some quite tight margins in here. The XG per game tells us how good and how regularly chances are being created by these sides down at the bottom, and it's not great reading for Rotherham here, who haven't been great at accumulating much of an XG so far this season. They've actually been overperforming that this far into this season. They've been averaging an XG of just 0.88 8, and those numbers do tend to catch up with you over the course of an entire season, and perhaps that's a reason why they currently find themselves on this winless run they do at the moment. In this regard, it is actually Wigan, the only side in the bottom 5 who have averaged an XG of over 1 goal per game, but they have been guilty of missing quite a few gilt-edged chances. And XG faced per game also isn't great reading for Rotherham fans. No surprise to see Cardiff coming out in this statistic as the best of those other Championship sides down at the bottom, as they have kept things fairly tight at the back this season, facing an XG of just over 1 goal per game. In terms of Rotherham's numbers though, those are some quite concerning ones, facing an XG of 1.6 per game, getting up to that 2 goals they're facing per game in terms of an XG. This will have come as a consequence of how they set up, particularly away from home at times, where they do very much go into a lot of games looking to soak up a lot of pressure. They do receive a lot of shots on goal, and sometimes that has played to their advantage, where they've managed to, nick a point or a result on the road from going in with that game plan. But once again, over the course of an entire Championship season, those sorts of numbers can catch up to you. Blackpool also not great in this regard, 1.54 XG faced per game, another side who tends to face quite a lot of shots and things like that. And then we got Huddersfield and Wigan next up. Shots taken per game sort of goes against the script though, because Cardiff are by far and away the best in this regard, taking an average of 11.9 shots per game, despite being by far and away the lowest scoring side in the Championship. Perhaps this does speak to the fact of how wasteful they have been this season. I mean, there have been a lot of home games in particular where they have been the side on top, they've just not got anything over the line in terms of the quality in the final third, and ultimately that's been the thing to really bite them so far this season, despite taking quite a few shots on average per game. Rotherham once again coming in at the bottom of this statistic, just taking 8.6 shots per game, another quite concerning one I think for Millers fans, particularly with the current run of form. Shots faced per game, it's not great reading for Blackpool and Rotherham in here. Blackpool facing an average of 15 shots each game they play, Rotherham not faring all too much better than that, facing 14.8, backed up by the high XG numbers that each of those sides are facing at the moment, and probably speaks to the style of play that's been in at both clubs so far this season as a reason why they have faced so many shots. Interestingly enough, it is actually Wigan who come out on top in this statistic, only facing an average of 10.6 shots per game, despite the fact that they've conceded the most goals out of all of these Championship clubs, and maybe that speaks to some big underperformances in the goalkeeping department this season, and a few other factors to take into consideration with that one. And then the last one I thought we'd look into for today's video was open play goals, because obviously there's different ways that clubs go about scoring a goal, but open play goals tells us how prolific a side is from open play. Ultimately that's the bread and butter. A side can be a set piece specialist or anything like that, but if you're struggling to create and score from open play, you're going to end up near the bottom of the table and you're going to have problems. And this has been a massive issue for Wigan Athletic, especially this season. Despite Cardiff being the outright lowest scorers in the league this season, both Huddersfield and Wigan have scored less goals than Cardiff have in open play this season. Wigan scoring just 13 goals in open play all season. Blackpool by far and away the best in this statistic, scoring 24 goals in open play. I think why I have it in the back of my mind that Blackpool are a bit better of an attacking outlet than some of these other sides is because they score more of their goals from open play, and that's backed up by these stats here. But those were the underlying stats which I thought were worth looking into for the sides down at the bottom of the Championship. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is tally up how each Championship side ranks in terms of those underlying numbers. So if a side came top of any of the rankings, I've given them 5 points, second 4 points, third 3 points, fourth 2 points, and last just 1 point. As points per game and projected points are pretty much the same statistic, I've only included one of those rankings on this overall tally. But without any further ado, let's have a look at these scores. So scores out of 40 based on the underlying metrics that we judged each of these Championship clubs by. It's actually Rotherham coming in at the bottom of the pile with the lowest scores out of the bottom 5 in the Championship right now, with a score of just 21 out of 40. Sure, there are plenty of concerned Millers fans at the moment, given the current run of form. They are currently outside of the bottom 3, but with that gap continuing to narrow by the week, the fact that their underlying numbers aren't great for reading compared to some of these other sides, that will be a cause for concern. Neil Warnock also has a massive job on his hands, despite the first bounce he got from his squad with that win over Birmingham. There's still a hell of a lot of work to be done on this Huddersfield squad. That can be seen by their underlying metrics also not coming out great on this one. They come in with an overall score of 22 out of 40 and are just ahead of Rotherham in that regard. And what I found quite interesting was that both Blackpool and Wigan are exactly tied, both picking up 24 points when we judge them by the 8 underlying metrics that we've gone through in today's video. So based on those statistics, or a range of them, there's not been much to separate Blackpool and Wigan this season. And then by far and away coming in as the best sides based on those underlying metrics, we have Cardiff coming in with a grand score of 32 points out of a possible 40. So massively trumping the other 4 sides who they are down there at the moment with. This would suggest that they are the favourites out of these sides to go ahead and avoid the drop at the moment. The point tally goes ahead and backs that up, but obviously the back-to-back wins played a massive role in that. But guys, there we have it. That is the current relegation picture in the Championship. I'd be very interested to get your guys' verdict on this one down below. If you had to call the bottom 3 right now, who do you think is going down and who will avoid the drop? Also, do you see any other Championship clubs being dragged into this relegation scrap? We spoke about the 5 most likely to go down in today's video, but I certainly wouldn't be ruling out the likes of Birmingham, Stoke and QPR at the moment, given the way they've been going recently. But that will wrap it up for today's video, guys. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like, and I'll see you all in the next one.